We felt this session was very important because in our network, sometimes we don't explore issues of power. And Cedar and Ruslan are international experts on the topic of the right use of power. Thank you so much, Cedar and Ruslan. Over to you.
Okay, well, Cedar asked me to begin things, and we've already had a moment of silence, which is a good thing. A bit about myself, and then I'll turn it over to Cedar. I entered Subud a little over 61 years ago when I was 21, and now I'm about 83, 83 años, un viejito, no? When I was entering Subud, I just completed my university bachelor's degree. I went on to get a doctorate based on Bapat's advice, and I became university professor and dean, decano, and then vice rector, vice president. And then I entered the nonprofit world, the NGO world, and became executive director of nonprofits and fundraiser. And actually, where most of you are right now, I helped raise the money to build that building. So I'm happy about that. I also fundraised for Subud over the years. Even though I retired, I kept writing books, and I've now published 12 books. So all of that, a lot of it has to do with receiving from Almighty God, I hope. So, Cedar, my wife, mi esposa, who are you?
It's so nice to be here, and it's such a miracle that we can have people in other countries, and Ruslan and I from Boulder, Colorado, be with you without having to get a plane ticket. Amazing. So let's see about me. I joined Subud pretty quickly, right after meeting Ruslan 13 years ago. And I went to my first, I wanted to see who Ruslan's friends were. And that was part of vetting him. Did I want to marry him? So I went to the first national conference in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I got so excited by the people and friends that Ruslan had that I ended up getting opened right there at the conference. That was just unbelievably magical. July 5th, 13 years ago. And now I have been for a few years a helper and in our Subud group in Boulder, Colorado. I have a background as an elementary school guidance counselor and teacher, and also background as a Hakomi body-centered psychotherapy teacher and therapist. And about 30 years ago, I got fascinated with first ethics, and then realizing that ethics is actually the right use of power. And that broadened my idea of ethics into the world of power, which we hardly ever talk about by name. And in Subud, we certainly know it as power of God, power of the great life force. We recognize that power, but I got so interested in how it is in our relationships with each other, relational power. So I've been studying that, thinking about it for years and hoping, I presented about it at which
It was at the Christchurch, New Zealand Congress in 2001 right. World Congress, yes.
And people thought that, I found it very interesting, and I've been looking for another opportunity to talk with you about it since. And I'm especially excited to be co-presenting it with Ruslan, who knows, he's taken the training that I offer in right use of power probably 6 times, yeah. And so we're just delighted to be co-presenting here, and really hope we will be planting some seeds that can water and grow and be helpful to us in Subud world. So back to you, Ren. I call him Ren.
I'm going to define power and tell you about some different kinds of power. Cedar is the real expert. She's the jefa here. She's the main person. I'm her assistant. So I'll just try to say a few things. A major idea is we've been talking a lot about pandemics these days for good reason. And when you think about it, the misuse and abuse of power is probably the world's oldest pandemic. It's a major public health problem, actually. Think of domestic abuse all the way to international abuse, which we normally call war. So a misuse and abuse of power is really a bad thing for us as individuals and for us as the human race and even the animals. But power itself is actually value neutral. Think about atomic power. It can be used to light houses. It can be used to destroy houses. The very same atomic power is neutral, but can be used in better or worse ways. It's true also of the power that we have as human beings. So power, according to dictionaries, is really having influence or having an impact or an effect. Good effect or bad effect. Now, we're now talking about maybe 5.5 types of power. We're working on setting up a 6th type of power. We'll talk mainly about 2 or 3, really just 2. The first is personal power. We all have power. Even babies have power. They cry, they get changed, they get food, they get cuddled. So the ability to assert ourselves, to get our will, to get what we need is power. Even our cat has power. It comes and gives us a certain look. We know we have to feed it. So every sentient being has personal power. But beyond that, there's role power. Now, Cedar likes to demonstrate role power by that scarf that she has. When she takes it off, she's just herself. But when she puts it on, she becomes the executive director of the Right Use of Power Institute, Dr. Cedar Barstow. And in Subud, we know power this way. Saudara-saudara sekalian, hari ini Pak Ruslan akan memberikan klarifikasi tentang power. Terima kasih. So you see, we can take off and put on our power. Yeah, Baba yang mulia ada di sini. He's still there. He's up there. And maybe he's also in here. And yet power changes, and Cedar will explain that. So even when President Biden or even President Trump goes to the doctor for their annual checkup, at that moment, the doctor has more power, we say is up power, to the President of the United States. So power in your role can actually shift. Okay, I'll just mention the other kinds of power and then turn it back to Cedar. Beyond personal and role power, we have collective power. We know what's called in Europe and in Latin America syndicates. We call them unions. They have power, right? So the power of people working together as a team is more powerful than one person. That's collective power. Beyond that, there's status power. In China, for example, old people are up power. In most of Western Europe, old people don't have as much power as young people. So it depends on the culture, but there's status power. Men and women, gay people, straight people, there are different levels of power according to status, which society gives. Then there's systemic power. That's the fifth kind, power of systems. Finally, this is the one we're working on now. There's the universal power or the great life force power. So these are the kinds or types of power. And now back to you, Cedar.
Thanks, Ruslan. So I want to help us focus on role power here. And I'd like to ask you a few questions. And since this is a hybrid where you have some people who are online and most of you in the room there, I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. So, actually, I'll ask the people who are there in the room if you would stand. So, how many, and we're looking at, don't stand yet, I'll tell you when, thank you. I wasn't clear. How many, I'm going to look for the kinds of role power that are in the room. How many of you, please stand if you are a helper in Subud? That's most of you. Okay, that is a power role. Thank you, sit down. Now please stand if you're a project leader.
Thinking now of a Susila Dharma project.
Okay, fewer, but some of you. And Olga, thank you. Raised your finger. Okay, thank you. Sit down. Please stand if you're a representative of a Subud national body.
Including Susila Dharma body.
Olga, thank you. Okay, so another big group of you, that is also a role power. All right, thank you. Please stand if you're an SDIA board member. Nobody, okay. And please stand if you are another Subud functionary of some sort. I want to say a little more about role power. So when I am a psychotherapist and I go into my office, I, in my mind or literally, put on my scarf. This symbolizes the add-on extra power I have as a psychotherapist with my client. My client wouldn't want to come to see me as my client will be counting on me as having more information, more experience, more responsibilities. This is also similar. Most of you are helpers. When you are a helper, you're putting on your extra added on role power, which means the people in your group will be counting on you for having more experience and being able to guide them. In Subud, power is a little more subtle than in some of the power differential relationships Ruslan was talking about. Like there's a very power difference between a doctor and their patient, between the president of a country and the citizens. But Subud is much, much smaller and it's harder to remember. Like when in the very beginning of this meeting, Hamida said, well, who's gonna take charge here? Who's the chairman? And you shuffled around and kind of wondered who it was and what you were going to do. So that's a particular power role. And when you're in Subud, we take it off and on without even noticing. And that makes it harder to pay attention to in a way. So I notice that when I'm a teacher or a psychotherapist and I sit in my chair and imagine or put on my scarf, my posture changes a little bit. I settle in and I shift my focus from me, ordinary me. I shift my focus to my client. As a helper, you're shifting your focus to the people in your Subud group. And then I take it off the end of the day. I don't want to be carrying my clients home with me or my students home with me. I want to be free to be little old me again. But I need to remember to some of my responsibilities get stuck in me instead of hanging them in the scarf. Okay, so I want to go next to talking about power roles. And as Ruslan said, we call it up power and down power. So talk about the value that the power difference in relationship has. So when you are in an up power role, and we just named them in your group here, this has value because it provides some structure within which you can be really collaborative. So I want you to notice in your up power role, and some of you have 2 or 3, pick one or any. I want you to notice and raise your hand if you see that there's some value in your having ultimate decision-making authority. You notice that. You didn't have to raise your hands, but some of you did. Good. There's another value, overseeing and making assessments about how the relationship is going or how the project is going. Providing direction and guidance. That's what we do as helpers. Supporting relationally healthy relationships. That's another value and responsibility. You notice these values also have responsibilities. Role and responsibility clarity. Who does what? Watching for and attending to conflicts, which I know is one of the biggest issues any group has to deal with, and certainly happens in all Subud groups. Okay, those are the values of power difference. Now, take a breath, and we're going to shift into my inviting you into an imagination process where you'll get to develop some more sensitivity and feel what it's like to be both up tower and down power. So please settle in your chair, put down your pencil and paper. Take a breath. And now put on an imaginary scarf or hat as if you're symbolizing that you are going to be in your up power role, your position of greater responsibility. keeping also your personal power. Okay. So while you were in this, imagining yourself in your up power role, I want you to notice, does your body shift in any way? Does your posture change? And just notice. Does your attention shift when you put on your scarf or hat of added on power? How does it feel to have this added on power? Are you trying to minimize it or make it bigger? What is it like inside you? Does it feel heavy, joyful, soft? What is it like to be aware that you have more influence and more responsibility? And gather any more information that's coming to you. And now I want you to imagine taking off your scarf that symbolizes taking off your extra responsibilities and role power and being your ordinary self. So move around a little bit to shake that off. You're in a different place now. Now you are in a down power position. You're just an ordinary Subud member. And you are here in a room full of people with role power. And see what it's like to be an ordinary person here, just in your personal power, which of course is huge, but no extra added power. What do you notice? Does your body shift? Does your attention shift in any way? How do you feel toward these people who you have special responsibility and authority with? Notice if you tend to idealize them or devalue them. Notice how you know if you trust them. Trust is something that needs to be earned. Notice if you have how you want to be treated or how you don't want to be treated. Gather the information and come on back. Okay, I want to invite you to turn to somebody next to you and just talk for like 3 minutes about anything you noticed from that little exercise we did.
Well, I'm going to talk briefly about two things that are really important to pay attention to in using our power with greater wisdom and skill. One is what we call intention and impact. Often we say, well, we had good intentions, and that's a good thing to have. But the really important thing is how our intentions land on the other person or people, how they work out. So we suggest that what's really important is not the intentions, although they are important, but what's more important, actually much more important, is the impact of our words or actions. So it's important to track or to look at how what we are doing or saying impacts the other person. And this is especially important if we're like Olga, if we're a doctor, a medical doctor, or if we're the head of a company, or if we're a helper or a national helper or an international helper. If we have that kind of power, we have to make sure that what we're doing or saying has a beneficial or a good impact on the individual or on the people concerned. The Indonesians have a proverb, they say, bagaimana nanti, which means, how is it later? What that's really saying is, how did what we do or say work out with the people that we were talking to or acting on? And this relates to the second idea or principle, which we call the 150% principle. In any relationship, let's say a relationship of two people, husband and wife, parent and child. Well, parent and child is a better example, where the parents are up power to the children. Interestingly, even the lowest worker who comes home is still up power to his or her children. So in that case, we say each person in the relationship, let's say the parents and the children, have 100% responsibility for the health of that relationship. But the up power person, in this case, say the parents, have 150% responsibility. In other words, they need to be even more careful. An example is when I was learning riding, my English horseback riding teacher said, when you come to a low-lying branch of a tree, make sure your head is lower than the head of your horse. The horse isn't thinking, oh, I have this nice person on top of me who's 2 or 3 feet higher than my head, because if you're not careful, this will happen. Now, in the case of parents and children, if you have your little child on your shoulders and you're walking through a door, you have to remember that the child's head is higher than the top of the door, and so you go down so that you can take the child safely through that doorway. That's what we mean by the 150% principle. As the parent, you're up power, so you have even more responsibility. The child isn't the one, even if they duck, they still may be hit by the top of that door. So the up power person, and think of yourself as the head of a factory, the head of a company, the coach, a Roman Catholic priest, what have you, they have to be even more responsible. So this we call the 150% principle. So at this point, is this all clear? ¿Es claro? ¿Comprenden ustedes? Sí. Okay. Now back to you, Cedar.
Yeah, I want to build a little on what you said.
Okay.
If I may. So with intention and impact, this is such a simple idea, but there are so many conflicts that result from intention and impact not matching. So often, and notice about yourself, if somebody says, oh, if somebody has a different response than you intended, do you go quickly and say, oh, well, really, I meant this, and you heard it wrong, and or something that's sharp, rather than recognizing that, yes, your intention was true, and yes, how they heard it and responded was also true. But when you're in the up power role, you have more responsibility for the health of the relationship. Not exactly 50% more, but it's easy. It's an easy principle to remember. And so instead, when somebody heard something different than what you intended, step back inside and get curious about, my, this is what I intended, but what did you hear? What happened here? What happened between what I said and what you heard that brings a conflict or a rift between us? Okay, any no, let's go to questions at the very end. I want to talk about the next thing, which is feedback. So notice what happens inside when you hear the word, I have some feedback for you. Most of us just tense up and say, oh no, I've done something wrong, I'm bad, I'm going to have to do something different. Actually, feedback is, I like to think of it as an investment in the relationship. I want to tell somebody how what they did affected me, and in the end, hoping that we can get even closer over this. I think that giving and receiving feedback non-defensively and with curiosity is the most important skill for leaders, for people in up power roles.
A friend of ours who unfortunately passed away recently was a senior airline captain who flew United Airlines planes between North America and other continents, such as Asia and Europe. And a situation arose where when he came home, he started treating his wife and family like they were crew on the airplane. And he bossed them around, as we Americans like to say, told them, do this, do that. The family, the wife especially, but also the kids, didn't appreciate being treated like underlings as opposed to family members. And they gave him feedback. And the good news is he took the feedback with grace, and they came up with a way of dealing with it. When he would come home, he was still in his uniform. He would take his captain's hat off. He would take his jacket with all the gold stuff on it off and hang it up. And he said, your husband and your father are back home. And it worked. And peace was restored to the family. So this is all about, if one can receive feedback with grace and act on that feedback, it's possible to improve relationships that are going in a bad direction. We have something relates to that. We call it the do-over. Now, I'll give you an example from Cedar's and my life. We both have our doctorates, so we're both big shots in our own mind, me more than Cedar, of course. And so one time she left the screen door open in the summer, and the flies and the bees and the mosquitoes, hornets, all kinds of bees were coming in the house. And when Cedar came up from her office downstairs, I said, Cedar, can't you be more considerate? You know, you're letting all of nasty nature into our house. You should really close the screen door when you go out. And so I really hurt her feelings because I was being pretty mean. And so she said, do you think we can do a do-over? And of course, I got it. You know, you can accomplish a lot more with honey than with vinegar. So I said, gee, dear, I often forget to close that screen door, and then all the bees and the mosquitoes come in, and those flies that keep us up at night, you know. And I'm trying to be better about it and close the screen door. And I noticed you left it open, which is easy to do. So we should both really work on closing the screen door. And then we hugged and we kissed, and calm was restored. So if we do make a relationship mistake where we misuse our power, it's good to be able to apologize, but more than just say, I'm sorry. It was really your fault, but I'm sorry. Instead of doing that, do a do-over. And it really is helpful to the relationship. And this is true, especially if you're up power as with your kids. Nothing's more powerful than when your parents say to you, and all of us can still remember our mom or our dad shouting at us for something dumb we did, and said, gee, dear, I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have yelled at you. It was my mistake. Now I'm going to be the good mom or the good dad, and let's do it in a different way, and then do that do-over. And when that happens, it's like, wow, that is so awesome. My mommy's really nice. She's not mean. And I think if we can remember that, especially when we're up power, it will have a very positive impact on our relationships. So with that, I think we're done with our basic presentation. Cedar, back to you.
So let's see if you have any questions or sense of how you might be able to apply what you've what we've been talking about today.
Something you said earlier, Cedar, about when you are not in the position of power and you're around somebody who is in the position of power, how do you perceive them? Do you have this sense of idolization, or do you have the sense of what did you call devaluing them?
Mhm.
And it triggered something inside of me that I realized I've had for most of my life that I feel uncomfortable about, is that I'm not very good at respecting people in positions of power. I often feel very disrespectful. And so I wondered what it is that I can do to help me in my life to overcome that, so that I might be a better person who, when I am in a position of power, if I don't have much respect for those, I don't feel like I'm setting up a very good example.
Yeah, yeah. Well, great comment, great insight. And actually, whenever we get into positions of up power, down power, especially down power, we are bringing to that relationship like everything in our past. So if we had good experiences with people in authority, like police people or parents or Subud helpers, we bring that that expectation of they're going to take care of things. We can bring an idealization that's unfair expectation. A helper can't solve all of our problems just because they're a helper. They can't fix everything, can't make our Latihan terrific just because they're a helper. And we also bring our bad experiences. And maybe you had some negative experiences with authority in your past, and you bring that expectation. Maybe you were disrespected, so you expect to be disrespected by people in positions of authority, and you bring that expectation, which might not be relevant at all in the situation you're in. So what you can do is look back at your past history with power and authority and see if you can uncover some of it, and remember that it's a natural thing to try to idealize or even devalue people, and just notice it. Once you notice it, something will change. That's a long answer to your question. Yes. Okay. By masking, I understand now that when you are in an up power role, you the extra responsibility could feel like a mask. And because it's an extra layer, and it doesn't have to be a mask that makes you unnatural, but can be a warm, you can still have power with heart, you can still have your heart open and connected to people. So your role is, it doesn't make you unnatural.
Ok. A veces tenemos que asumir los roles y me tocó asumir muchos roles de autoridad por muchos años.
Sometimes we have to assume roles, and for many years I had to assume certain roles of authority.
Como directora de proyectos con 5 hijos, bueno, diferentes roles de autoridad.
As the director of projects with 5 children as well in different roles.
Y poco a
authority.
poco fui entendiendo y creo que Latija me ayudó muchísimo a entender
And bit by bit I started to understand, and I think the Latihan helped me to understand
que no hay que tener timidez cuando se asume un rol de autoridad.
that we don't have to be shy when a role of authority appears for us.
Simplemente te colocas tu sombrero
You simply put on your hat
y te lo quitas cuando es necesario, ¿sí?
and you take it off when it's necessary, right?
Pero entendí también que la autoridad es, o el rol de poder es para poder.
I also understood that the authority or the role of power is to have power to be able
Y finalmente para poder amar.
to love.
Cuando se tiene
Finally.
poder, llega un momento en que uno ve al otro con misericordia, con empatía, y uno también debe tener misericordia y empatía con uno mismo.
When you're in a role of power, you can get to a point where you can see others with empathy and mercy, and you can also have the empathy and mercy for yourself.
Y finalmente concluí que el poder es para finalmente poder amar.
And I finally got to the conclusion that to have power is to be able to love.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Excellent, well said. And we have a phrase, standing in your power while staying in your heart. Standing in your power while staying in your heart. When the up power person says yes to that role, doesn't minimize it, says yes, and the down power people say yes to that person's leadership, true collaboration can happen.
And I think just to add to that, Cedar, when we've done the Latihan over years with, really allowing the Latihan to work in us, then we are less in our egos in our daily life and more in our true selves. And I think when that's the possibility, when that actually happens, then it's easier to use power with heart and with wisdom and skill. Simply because it's not a question about, I'm a big shot and you better respect me. It's no, we're all here together as human beings and I have this role. And if I do it right, it will help all of us do our jobs better, to help humanity and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I agree. The
Beautifully
Latihan
said.
can be helpful. On the other hand, I've been in Subud long enough to see people who have been, quote, doing the Latihan for many years, doing things which were unfortunate. So by itself, there's a saying that God is a good worker, but likes to be helped. We have to do our part as human beings, which often means also gaining skill and using our willpower to try to do things in a better way. And so that's why even for Subud people, Dr. Rahman Mitchell took Cedar's workshop, a much longer one, years ago in Christchurch, and said, even though he had been a Subud member for many years, this was helpful for him because he noticed that he had done some things that weren't as good as they might have been. And now he felt more prepared to do things in a better way. So, even if you're a longtime Subud member, but if you want to be a carpenter, for example, you still have to go to school to become a carpenter. It's like that. And I think that's why Cedar's work and this right use of power work has been quite powerful to help people live in a good way in this world, live in a better way.
Beautifully
Gracias.
said, Ruslan. So I am aware of time, and I know we started a little late, but you have a schedule that doesn't, that we have to stick to. So how are we doing on time there, Hamida?
We're doing very well. Can we take a couple more questions? We have a few more questions. Can we
Okay.
take them? Cedar, do you have time?
Yes, give us a couple more questions.
Ok. Ya. Gracias. Hay algo que en las relaciones del poder también uno se da cuenta que
Thank
Que-
you. When you're in relations of power, you can realize that
el poder se va convirtiendo en una gran actuación.
power can become in a great like theater show or acting.
Primero, hay que tener un conocimiento de lo que va a hacer.
First of all, you have to have an understanding of what's going to be.
Y después viene la colocación del sombrero para actuar. Uno se
And then there
convierte en
comes-
un gran actor.
Putting on of the hat to be able to act, you can become a great actor.
Lo digo porque lo he vivido.
I say this because I have lived this.
Entonces, para mediar esa relación del poder,
So to be able to mediate this relationship of power,
para no dejarse manipular, porque en el poder hay relaciones de manipulación,
to not be able to to not be manipulated, because in the power there are relationships with manipulation.
empleo el recurso del humor
I use the resource of humor
para poder mediar esa situación de relación, para
to be
poder,
able to mediate this relationship,
para no terminar en discordia o en pelea o en desavenencia. Entonces, el toque de humor es clave para las relaciones de poder.
to be able not to finish in disagreements or conflicts. The humor helps to mediate this situation.
Porque el humor, hay que tener buen humor, por supuesto, es una acción inteligente.
Because with humor, you have to have good humor, of course. It's
Una acción
is
inteligente
an intelligent action
para poder tener esa relación en el poder.
to be able to have this relationship in power.
Un poco lo de la actuación, un poco parecido a lo de la máscara, que es actuar, es simplemente considerarse un artista que va a actuar en ese rol del poder.
It's similar to the power of the mask. It's to be able to act, to have this role of power.
Y un poco lo que dice la hermana, siempre mediar a que haya, que sea, ¿cómo es la palabra que dijo? Propositivo, o sea, que sea positiva. Que,
So our sister, what she was saying is to be able to mediate so it can be positive,
para que haya una buena relación, ¿no?
so that
No
can be a good relationship
de fraternidad y de afecto, y no terminar en peleas.
of fraternity and not end up in conflicts or fights.
En Colombia nos ha tocado aprender a vivir así, en poder mediar y relacionarnos.
In Colombia, we have had to live this and being able to mediate and relate to each other.
Thank you.
Gracias.
I hear a lot of wisdom in this room coming forth in your questions. Thank you so much for taking this really to heart. Based on what the last person said, I want to say that there are two ways that you can become an actor as in a leadership position. One way is by acting as if role power didn't matter, minimizing it, making it small. And the other is making role power too big and acting too big in it and connecting, fusing together role power and personal power and thinking that that's you.
So Cedar, you're saying that there's a just right place and we
Yes.
have to find it between being a dictator and being what we call a doormat. And finding just that right point of how to behave in any situation.
Excellent. That simplifies it. And I think that's what the last person was saying, was talking about.
Yeah, and Cedar said, hay mucha sabiduría en esta sala. Gracias a todos.
Sí.
En la lista para hablar hay Adela, Mónica y usted. Primero, Ramón.
Bueno, hello. So I'm still thinking about the relational aspect of power, and I think intention and impact describes that, but it seems to me that it's more from the perspective of the one who is supposed to be in the role of power. However, as this is a play or a game, sometimes we shift positions. That is one thing that I think we should consider. So the other one is playing in the relationship in a way that is not supposed to. And the other aspect, I think, is how being in the 150% of power side implies also the much we have to change to be able to respond properly to what people is expecting from us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Hamida, I think maybe we're at the end of our time now. How is that?
We
Well,
have a couple more questions. Go ahead.
I'm asking a practical question. So in the position of you being equal in an up power role, and certain people in that role are more enthusiastic with the feedback and not accepting feedback themselves. Any tips, strategies?
That happens. That happens. And so stepping back and talking about how to gracefully, non-defensively give and receive feedback in a way that the other person can hear it. Because sometimes we don't hear it when it's positive feedback because we just can't let that in. And sometimes we have trouble hearing it if it's critical feedback because we feel ashamed or guilty rather than being able to find out, what do you mean here? Could you tell me an example of this? How does this affect you? So on. Curiosity is a huge, useful tool. When you get in any kind of trouble or confusion, try to activate your curiosity. It will change a lot in the relationship. I see Amina nodding her head online.
And Cedar also often says that down power is not no power. And I remember a movie of some years ago called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And the mother advises the daughter who's about to get married because the father just said, I'm the head of the family. And the mother sort of says to the daughter, well, the men are maybe the head of the family, but remember that we women, we wives are the neck, and the neck turns the head. So down power is not no power. And I think that a lot of people who are in down power positions learn to be very clever in working with up power people to try to educate them slowly but surely. Because the idea is, look, we're in this relationship, we have to live together. So we have to find ways, we have to be clever, and, you know, it can happen. And I think in every relationship, there's always these working out of things. But there are situations where human beings may be Machiavellian. And they're always on idea of win and lose. In other words, if I win, you're gonna lose. That's just how things are. And our hope is to gain a world in which more people think about win-win. In other words, winning isn't really winning unless everybody involved wins. And, you know, I mean, certain people in this world would never take a course on the right use of power, alas.
This was
But the
very,
rest of us just do the best we can. And if more people learn to be skillful in relationships, that's really what the program is about. That will be for the betterment of the world. And all we can say in Spanish is ojalá que sí.
ojalá que sí.
Sí.
This
So,
was really interesting, very interesting.
good.
Thinking of maybe being conscious of when you're in the use of power or when you're in up power, always being conscious that you can use it rightly or wrongly. And I think that when we're in the use of power, love should always go with the hand of power. And in that perspective of love, you probably won't do it wrong. You will probably do it a little better.
Right.
Thank you,
We all
Olga.
have teachers or parents like that, you know, who have been wonderful, who know just what we need and provide it.
Yeah.
And those should be our role models in whatever we do, whether up or down power.
Mhm.
And,
Amor vincit omnia.
and we
Yes,
have,
that's right.
we can take this one last question here. I see you standing up.
Thanks very much. It's a down power thing and being manipulated instead of manipulating. And I think directly about our funders and our sponsors and the honesty of the feedback that we sometimes don't give, because we are talking to people who are in a position of giving the money. So we give the answers. It's manipulative. So my actual thing is, I think, how do you take your feedback? It's very, very important how you take your feedback, at what level you actually take your feedback. If you take feedback at this level, you don't always get the right answer. But if you go and sit with somebody in a sitting room and talk, you get a different feedback completely. Thank you.
Yes, feedback, giving and receiving it authentically is a high skill and art. So we want to
Peter,
thank you.
can you take one last question? One last one. We promise. I promise. We're exploiting
Okay,
you. But
one last.
just one last one.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos.
Good
Quería
afternoon,
solamente decirles esta pregunta, ¿no? La diferencia entre líder y jefe.
I want to ask
Hay
a
jefe y gran jefe,
question between
hay
a
líder y gran
leader.
líder. Y yo creo que el líder es el que puede tener todavía comprensión y compasión, que hablan en inglés compassion.
Necesito poder traducir.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Power with heart.
Gracias, Cortés.
Ya.
Yes,
Decía que la diferencia entre líder y jefe.
I was asking about the difference between a leader and a
Chef.
boss.
Boss.
Y que obviamente el líder tiene capacidad de comprensión, compasión y aprendizaje.
And the leader has the capacity of comprehension, compassion, and
Learning. Y obviamente
La buena distinción, compadre.
el gran jefe tiene el mismo
De
poder.
acuerdo. Sí.
boss has the same power as
the leader.
As the leader.
The chef has the same power. Pero pienso que el el llegar a ser líder es una evolución.
I believe that becoming a leader is an like evolution.
Convertirse en líder es un proceso.
To become a leader is a process.
El jefe dice, haz esto.
The boss says, do this.
El líder dice, hagamos esto.
The leader says, let's do this.
Quería preguntar si estamos de acuerdo con este
I wanted
criterio.
to ask if we're in agreement with this criteria or this way of seeing things.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm appreciating how much interest you've expressed in this conversation about power. And I want you to know that we've sent you 2 handouts. One of them summarizes what we were talking about today for you. And we also have programs at Right Use of Power that you can come to learn about more. And we have books we've written.
Thank you, Cedar. I bought the book and I'm going to sign up for your workshop. So do we appreciate what Cedar and Ruslan have given us? Bless you, and thank you so much. This has really been an important workshop for us in Susila Dharma. Thank you so much. And now we can take this into our next, continue the theme of power in other workshops. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bless you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Adios todo el mundo. Bye-bye, everybody from Colorado.
Adios. Adios.
Adios, Pampa
Nice to
mia.
see you, Amina.
Nos vamos.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, sister.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.